On episode 683 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Nicole Sachs and discuss her book, Mind Your Body, a revolutionary program to release chronic pain and anxiety. Welcome to the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, the largest and longest running health and fitness podcast dedicated to people over 40. Whether you're looking to lose weight, get stronger, or improve your health and age better, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Coach Allan, an online health and fitness coach and author of the Wellness Roadmap. Each week, we dive into practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and fitness. If you're ready to look, feel, and perform your best, no matter your age, this podcast is the perfect place to start. Let's get you on the path to a healthier, fitter, and more energetic version of yourself. I hope you'll join us each week, and together we can unlock your full potential. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast. I'm really glad that you're here, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. As this goes live, I'm back in Puerto Vallarta. This is one of my favorite places on earth. I love coming here. I've been coming here for over 20 years, and I just enjoy coming here. But I'm here this time for some work and play, I guess. It's a company retreat. I do some coaching for a company called Online Trainer Mentorship. And so in that, we're having a company retreat here. I came down a couple days early, primarily because it takes me 2 days to get here and 2 days to get back. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense to only come down for 3 days when you're going to spend 4 days traveling. So I came down a little early because I want to do this hike that I was introduced through one of you. It's the Boca del Tamatalan to Los Animas Beach hike. It's about 8 kilometers. It's supposed to be moderately difficult, but I'm looking forward to it. Got my water bottle ready to go, hat, sunscreen. I'm doing this hike today, which is supposed to be an adventure type thing. So really going to enjoy this and then get to hanging out with other coaches I work with, but really having some fun, enjoying myself and getting some work done. At any rate, let's go ahead and talk about chronic pain. Our guest today is a speaker, writer, psychotherapist, retreat leader, and podcaster who has dedicated her work and her practice to the treatment of chronic pain and conditions. She is the author of the online courses, Freedom from Chronic Pain, Freedom from an Anxious Life, and the Sachs Solution Practitioner Training. She's on the faculty at the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies in New York. With no further ado, here's Nicole Sachs. Nicole, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Thanks for having me.
So the name of your book is Mind Your Body, a revolutionary program to release chronic pain and anxiety. And, it's something I hear from my clients and anyone I'm talking to that's over the age of 40. Everything hurts.
Yes.
Everything hurts. And I think right now, just in the world, if you don't have a little bit of anxiety, you're just not even paying attention.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we need tools to help us manage these things. And you're bringing good news.
I am indeed. And I think I'm bringing, for what some will find completely new news. And so, I'm excited to offer people options that maybe they didn't know they had.
Yeah, now, there was a quote in the book, and I had to write this down because I think it's really important for someone to understand. But the quote is this: hope paves the way to healing.
Yes.
And when you're in chronic pain, when there's all this anxiety, that might be the biggest challenge, is finding hope.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that probably if people are new to this, it's best to start with the fact that all pain is rooted in brain science. I think that because, like you said, the over 40 set, and I am among you, I'm 52, I'll be 53 in May. It tends to be, like you said, this cliche where as you get older, you're like, oh, well, I'm not going to sit down on the floor or else I might never get up. That kind of thing that you hear all the time. And I really do want to debunk that, because even though, of course, aches and pains are the natural consequence of aging, it is not as inevitable as people think. So it's probably best for me to just start with a really brief primer of the brain science, because I think that when people get it, that what I'm talking about is, first of all, so rooted in studies and in commonly held beliefs about the way the human body functions. It's just an easier entry point into understanding what I'm exactly talking about. So essentially, the first thing I always say is, no matter what your pain or your anxiety is, no matter the severity or the scale, it is not in your head. You are not hysterical. You're not making it up. You're not at fault. You're not too sensitive. Like, no matter what is happening, pain is expressed through the body. And anything that I'm describing that has a root in this brain science is still feeling to the individual the same as if their limb were severed. It's not a different sensation. The question we are actually answering here is, why are the pain signals firing? And so that's the first thing I'll say. And next, I'll say that the reason that hope is such a catalyst for healing is because the human nervous system and brain, that partnership, is the reason that we have stayed alive as a species for millennia. So, the most basic function that we have as a human person is to stay alive: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. This is the most basic rooted element of being a human being. And because of that, the brain and the nervous system don't ask your opinion, nor do they ask your permission before they protect you. You touch a hot stove, you pull it off. There's no reflection moment of that. And so, because of that, we have to kind of really pause and slow down if we're interested in understanding why we're such a society of suffering people, to say, okay, well, let's maybe replace my fear and skepticism with curiosity just for a moment, because it's hard to go straight to hope. Hope is a place that needs to be earned. So if we can just start with curiosity and just say, that's interesting. I thought that I have that chronic shoulder problem that's keeping me from working out because I had that shoulder injury when I was 25. Now I'm 45 and it's still my bad shoulder. I always kind of took that for granted. But now Nicole is saying, maybe there's more to understand here, why my neural pathways are stuck in that pain cycle. So what I don't want to have to jump to hope, because I feel like that's unreasonable, but just curiosity is the door that really gets us in.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about that pain cycle, because that kind of drives this whole process of us understanding how we can use the tools that you're going to give us to get better.
Yes. Okay. So the first thing I like to tell people about pain is all pain is experienced through the interaction with the body and the brain. And this is, by the way, there's nothing controversial about this even slightly. Every scientist or doctor in the world would agree with this, that when you touch the hot stove, you think that you're having pain in your finger. And ultimately, the pain is expressed through your finger. But what happens when you touch the hot stove is the nerves in your finger send a message to your brain that say, the sensory environment has changed. Something's different here. And then the brain sends the message back to the finger. This is a dangerous situation in which the sensory environment has changed. We need to get out of this situation right away, or we could really be hurt. Now, I know this sounds sort of silly because I'm giving a voice to the brain and the nervous system, but it's all in an instant. This is happening. And so that's really important to understand, because when we're going through life and we're, anxious and we're full of pain and we're having these cycles of pain where we continually chronically have the same problems firing, it is good to slow down and say, okay, pain is expressed through the body, but it doesn't ever start in the body. So what mind body medicine teaches, what I teach, is that we live in a mind body system. And this is a good metaphor that I feel like helps people. If a house was on fire and the fire alarm was obviously attached to the systems in the house, when the house was on fire enough for the smoke to get to the fire alarm would go off. And the fire alarm is super loud, super jarring and irritating and screaming because it needs to get your attention. So the fire company comes and they start taking their hoses out, and you think they're going to put them toward the fire, but the alarm is so loud and it gets your attention so much, they start dousing the alarm. And in our scenario here, they don't know that there's anything else to do besides douse the alarm, because the alarm is really stealing all the focus. Now, of course, you and I know that that will never solve the problem. So what happens in mind body medicine is people are misunderstanding pain. So like, you think it's about your shoulder, you think it's about your stomach with your IBS, you think it's about your head with your migraines, you think it's about your mental health because you're so anxious all the time. And so what we do is we chase the alarm. The alarm is the stomach ache, the alarm is the shoulder, the alarm is the headache. So we go to specialists and we say, hey, gastroenterologist, I have a stomach issue, fix me. And in the best possible way, they try, because they have, treatment protocols and medication and diet changes and whatever. But in the end, that's the same as the fire company hosing down the alarm, because we have to look at the root. We have to look at the fire. We have to look at why these pain signals are being sent in the first place. And so that's how I start to bring people in to understand that and this is where it starts to be like, people are like, your stored trauma, the stuff that you've been through, your big feelings, rage and shame and sadness and grief and terror, like the big ones that we all feel, nobody is immune, send our nervous systems into fight or flight, because they are seen as predators. When you are that upset about something and you don't have real consciousness of how to fix it, your nervous system perceives that literally like a saber-toothed tiger is chasing you. So now we go into fight or flight. And when we're in fight or flight, the human animal is only meant for short bursts of fight or flight, right? Like, get us out of the situation, not these long-term 21st century fight or flight states that we end up in. And so pain is protective. So just like if you cut your finger and it hurts so you could know that you have to attend to it so you didn't get septic and die back in the early days, pain is the alarm because we need to know something is a problem. But in itself, it's not the problem. So I don't know if I'm getting too in the weeds, but essentially, what ends up happening is the nervous system sends the pain signals into the shoulder or the stomach because it's trying to say there's an issue here. But because the brain can't solve for grief or solve for trauma, all it knows is there's an issue, and it's sending something in order for you to take care of yourself. And actually, it really logically tracks, because if you're invited, let's say, to a dinner party with someone who has always really insulted you or like passive aggressive, and like inside you're not really thinking about it, but like, oh, it's such a drag, Jim's gonna be there, he always makes my night so unpleasant, but I have to go because so and so invited me. What happens in your system is it senses actually a predator in that conflict about going to the dinner party. And so if you get a migraine, or if your back goes out, or if you have a problem that is, quote, not your fault, and I put that in quotes because none of it's your fault, but when you can't say you don't want to go, but you can say my back went out and I can't go, then actually your nervous system perceives you as safer. And that's when we get into these cycles of not being able to get out of pain.
Okay. So, and that's also probably why you have a migraine, you have a pain, a joint problem, you get a medication, you get a surgery, but the pain doesn't actually stop.
Oftentimes that is the case. And that's so, okay, so I'll give you a little personal reason why I'm here, because I think it does help people to understand that I'm not just a therapist, I'm not just an author, I am a patient. I began this as a very like organic experience that my back went out when I was very young, in my late teens, so badly that I had to be brought home from college. And in being brought home, and any responsible parent would send you for the x-rays and the MRIs, and you should always get checked out by a medical doctor. Mind body medicine does not substitute for Western medicine. It is an addendum once people understand that there isn't something wrong with them that actually really requires like a cancerous tumor or, a bacterial infection. So my parents took me for these tests, and I actually did have an abnormality in my lower spine. It's called spondylolisthesis. And it's kind of like having a bulging disc or any other abnormality that is a finding on MRI. But of course, it was 1990, but still happens today. The doctors were like, this is the reason for your pain. You have this abnormality, it's really severe. This is why your back went out. And so, of course, we all were like, okay, what do you do? Tell us. We're ready. She can't walk, like she can't go back to college. Like, what do we do? And the doctor said, well, spinal fusion surgery is the protocol, but it doesn't guarantee that you're not going to be in pain. It'll just stabilize your spine. And I'm like, pain is the problem here. I am dying. I can't go to class. So what do you mean the surgery doesn't necessarily take away pain? And, over the years since, I've worked with countless orthopedists and neurosurgeons, and they all agree surgery rarely actually makes pain go away. And so if that's the case, we need to look at it, maybe people need surgery, maybe they don't. I'm not a medical doctor, but in the end, what I've found is that because surgery doesn't take away pain, and because oftentimes whatever abnormality you have in your body is not actually going to hurt you just on paper, then we have to talk about why the pain signals are firing. So I personally went on a journey of trying to understand my own body, which brought me to the work of Dr. John Sarno, who some people know is the mind body medicine kind of grandfather. He passed away years ago in his 90s, but he was the one who started all these theories that I kind of take the baton. And he was explaining this brain science, and I understood it. And when I did the work to understand what was going on in this sort of what I call an emotional reservoir of all these big, quote, dangerous feelings, my pain went away years and years. So I have the same abnormality in my back. I haven't had chronic pain for over 20 years. And all the things that the doctor said I would never do, like have biological children or exercise or travel, I do it all. I had 3 babies. I exercised till the day they were born. I travel the world. I can run 5 miles, and I'm 52. So that's where the hope comes in, Allan. That's where we are saying, like, there was a moment in our history when the earth was flat, and of course it was flat. I rode my horse from point A to point B, and I didn't fall off. I look at the horizon on the ocean, and it's straight line. The earth is flat. There's like no argument. I see it. And what I'm trying to say to people is we're in a flat earth moment here. We have an ability to think more deeply about human suffering and to open ourselves to some crazy life changes that I see every day in my work.
So let's talk a little bit about this work. You use a term in the book called journal speak.
Yes.
And I think you use that because this is not just everyday journaling that, is actually still quite valuable. You should probably be doing. But what is journal speak?
So, as I said, this was a very organic journey for me. It started for me as a patient. And so essentially, I understood the brain science, and I understood it to mean there's a lot of stuff in there that I have not looked at. Not because I did anything wrong, but because the human animal, God knows, I mean, we're all living a human life, can't possibly feel not only everything that daily life brings us, but every trigger back to our childhood where we were bullied or abused or neglected, like in even little t ways. Capital T trauma is very real. But most of us, many of us, have little t trauma, like that kind of death by 1,000 paper cuts, whatever happened. And so all of that is in there, and most of it stays in the unconscious. The reason it stays in the unconscious is if anyone ever learned about defense mechanisms, they defend us for a reason. When we repress things, it's because we just cannot handle feeling everything all the time. So if all of that is sort of living in this imagined reservoir that, like, just picture a clear science beaker that lives between your belly and your chest, and it's in there. And it's just, we dump it in when you're having trouble with your partner, you're having trouble with your kids, or like you're stressed out about your work or money or your body image or blah, 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 right? This is all of us. So it gets dumped into this reservoir. And when the reservoir reaches maximum capacity, just like any system, we live in a system that operates under the first law of thermodynamics. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It's just transferred from one form to the other. And that's just the truth. And so when the system gets too overloaded, it needs to vent somewhere. And so if we don't know how, or if we don't know that we have to, pay attention to it, consciously, it will vent through the headache, through the stomach, through the arm, through the knee, what have you. And so, why the reason journal speak was invented for me is that it was explained to me that one of a really good way, as you said, to get to that stuff is to journal. And I was like, okay, great, I'm gonna journal and like my physical pain's gonna go away. I was really skeptical. I was like, so anybody who is like saying, oh my god, what the hell is she talking about, I was with you. So I started, but I still was desperate. I needed to be out of pain. So I believed in this mind body connection. I believed in the brain science. So I start to do this journaling, and I'm like, okay, I'm like playing the tapes of my childhood. I'm transcribing stuff I've already thought about it a million times. I'd been to therapy. A lot of people say, Nicole, this can't work for me. I've been to therapy. I know all my stuff. And it's like, let's keep being curious, because I also had been to a lot of therapy, and I'd also been to school for being a therapist, which requires you to do a lot of self-reflection. So that does not necessarily build the bridge of this brain science and this that I'm talking about. So I'm doing this journaling, and then I had a moment where I was conscious of the fact that maybe there was something more in there. And I was journaling about motherhood, and I was really tired, and I had these babies, and I was saying the things that most people are willing to say. And then I just had this understanding, like, there's no way that this kind of stuff is the dark stuff that is causing my nervous system to feel like I'm in danger. And I had a thought, and I just was brave enough to write it down. And that's what I really want to invite everybody who's getting curious to do. When you this is a more complicated process than can possibly be discussed in one podcast, which is why I really, really do recommend picking up the book. I'm not saying that because I wrote it. I'm saying that because truly it is the roadmap for what you need to do this work for yourself. But in short, I became aware that there might be something in there, and I said, let's take this like an invitation, and I'm going to write it down, because I had a really dark thought that came to me. And the dark thought was, I hate being a mother. I hate this. It's not that I'm tired, it's that I hate this, and I'm trapped, and I'm failing. Like, it was dark. And what is beautiful about this process is if you are brave enough to take journaling and make it journal speak. So I named it Journal Speak because I started doing this work in a different voice, in a voice that is like an inner child, like an inner toddler. It doesn't stay true, and it doesn't even need to be actually true. You have to realize that the reason your nervous system feels in danger is because inside we're all actually 5 years old. Like, we've all grown up, and this podcast is for people over 40. We're all over 40, some of us much more so. And it doesn't really matter. All that matters is, actually, I love speaking to your audience because we're like grown up. We know that life can be hard. We know that life can be complicated. And the voice that is required to dump this reservoir out is a different voice. It's not regular journaling. It is like an unabashed, impolite, politically incorrect voice of a child who is kicking for a cookie before dinner. It is like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm sick of being a grown up. I don't want to help people. I don't want to care. I don't want to hear one more time that I'm screwing it up at work. Like, that kind of really unapologetic voice. So I started writing all this stuff down. And what really started happening is the journal speak took me on a ride. And it took me on a ride to really be able to say what I needed to say to my parents. Now, granted, this is a private process.
Yeah,
So
we're
I
going to
never
destroy this.
actually,
Yeah, we're going to
yes,
destroy
we're
this
going to
right
destroy
after we
this when
write
we're
it.
done. This is like blowing your nose in a tissue. You don't have to look at it again. Throw it away, flush it down the toilet. And I started saying things I think I had needed to say for a long time about my parents and about myself. There was a lot of self-loathing that came out. But what came to me, and this is what's really, really stunning, is that there are things inside of you that you may not know. And what happened to me in that moment is I said, wow, I think something might have happened that I need to talk about, which is when I was young, my parents were somewhat irresponsible with their decisions and money. I was moved a lot. I was an only child. I was lonely a lot. And I made this very quiet, sort of sweet promise to myself when I was about 10 or 11 years old, which I would never have been able to tell you, but my journal speak brought me there, which was, one day I'm going to have my own family and it's going to be perfect. and I am going to have the perfect partner and the perfect children. I mean, this is so sweet, like an 11-year-old, and it's going to heal the wounds of this, of all this pain. And so, what I had no idea, Allan, is I was living as a grown woman with children, waiting for toddlers to heal the pain of my childhood. Like, how hilarious and sweet and ridiculous is that to anyone who's lived with a toddler? And what I realized in that moment was that's the reason I hated it. I didn't hate it because I actually hated it. Actually, motherhood suited me quite a bit. It was that I was holding these completely unconscious needs for motherhood to fulfill that never it would. And it was so full of shame and sadness and grief and rage that I started expressing through my journal speak, that it was causing my nervous system to think I was in danger, and it was sending these terrible pain signals through my body. And so this is the way the story ends, or it begins, if you will. I woke up the next morning after this first crazy dump of journal speak. And by the way, this is not everyone's experience, but I do feel the need to say it was my experience because I was on a journey that led to, of course, quite a bit. Is my back pain was 80% gone, never to return, never to return. And I then just went nuts, and I did all my journal speak. I created it. I created the tool as I was living it on everything, on my body image, on my relationship, on my, all my stuff. And I teach everyone, by the way, in exquisite detail how to do this for yourself in the book. And I have never had chronic pain since. I have moved through other, what we call symptom imperatives in my work, meaning at one point I got headaches and I was like, instead of going down that fear spiral and thinking something was wrong with me and diagnosing myself with a migraine condition, I got really curious about those headaches. And then I was able to journal speak around what was going on in my life at that point. And the headaches went away because chronic pain is simply a misunderstanding and a misunderstood dance between the brain, the nervous system, and the body. And as soon as that pain is interrupted by taking a ladle into the reservoir, which is what we do with the journal speak, and dumping it out, the pain signals stop firing because the pain signals are only the alarm. If the fire isn't raging, the alarm doesn't go off. And so that is the best way I can describe journal speak.
All right. And then you have a process you called ANSR. Can you talk through that process? Because that was the second phase of what you did after you identify something and now you're able to address it.
Yes. Okay. So, what I guess I should tell everybody is that I am a psychotherapist, and for 18 years I was in private practice. So, before I stopped seeing people one on one to write books and travel and teach retreats and do memberships and all the things that I do for en masse, because I really realized I had to do this more than just like 1 hour at a time with people. I was in private practice, and I was really had the privilege for years and years to sit beside people as they did this work and they healed. And one of the things I learned is that there were four basic steps to moving through this process. And they are allow, name, stay, and release. And it was really funny because my partner Lisa and I, who we kind of take this message to the world together, it used to be allow, name, and release, ANR. And one day we were working through this work, and she looked at me and she's like, you can't just name things in your journal speak practice and have the pain release. You need to stay. You need to stay as long as you need to stay. The human nervous system is like an abused puppy that you just brought home from the shelter. It's not just going to release and jump into your lap. It might want to stay under the bed for weeks. It's been hurt. It's been traumatized in different ways, and it's confused and it's frightened. And so that's where the S came in. And that was really funny because one day I was actually doing my podcast. So I have a podcast that has hundreds of episodes because I interview people around the world with all of these different conditions that are totally well after doing this work. It's called The Cure for Chronic Pain. And I was literally in the middle of a podcast episode once when I was like, so it's allow, name, stay, release. And I'm like, ANS. It's the answer, ANSR. So we talk, it was really kind of cute that I like came to that in real time. But we talk about it as the answer: allow, name, stay, and release. And it's just the process by which we move through this healing. We allow by understanding the brain science, by saying, wow, I thought I was a person who had a bad knee because I blew out my knee in high school playing soccer, and I'll always have this bad knee, and it comes when there's bad weather, and sometimes it flares up and I can't walk. And we just decide that our earth is flat. This is what I can see, and this is what I can prove to myself. And so allowing is really allowing for a new paradigm, allowing for something to shift, allowing for there to be some openings for knowing something new. And then naming. Naming is a journal speak practice, and I teach you how to do it in this book. Slow down and figure out what the hell is in that reservoir. Let's do it together. It looks scary and it feels silly sometimes, but it is not, and it will change your life. And then stay. Okay, you're going to learn some stuff in your journal speak, and yes, it's unpleasant, but unpleasant does not equal unsafe. Uncomfortable does not equal unsafe, and we stay. Think about it. Your nervous system would never stay in a place that was dangerous. If you walked into a building and you looked around and you're like, this is not right, there is some stuff going on here, the first thing you would do is all of your changes in your body would happen, circulation, respiration, heartbeat, like you would prepare, you get the heck out of there. Your nervous system knows you wouldn't stay in a place that is unsafe. So when we find out these more uncomfortable, maybe confusing things that need more excavation in our journal speak practices, that's what we need to do. We need to consciously stay. We need to say, okay, I know I have a really complicated relationship with my mom, and I know there's been a lot of confusion and a lot of hurt. And I'm not including her in this yet. This is a private process. As you said, at the end of the 20 minutes, you destroy it. It's just an invitation. It's a venting. And so it's totally safe to write about this stuff, to reflect on this stuff, to stay with it. Your nervous system learns. We don't stay in a place that's dangerous. We stay in a place that's safe, and then release, which is the natural consequence of allowing, naming, and staying. The pain signals stop firing. The alarm stops ringing because there is no fire.
Great. Now, you gave your story, and you had pretty quick results. I mean, boom. But that's not the reality for everybody, and we need to know that there's no timelines to how all this works. You do have a 28-day challenge, but even that is not intended to be the end date for all of this. Can you kind of talk about, you know, expectations where people should kind of think that this is going to come about, and what you basically see on average?
Yeah, so the first thing I'm going to say is I did have a huge win, but it wasn't boom. The only reason I'm saying that, even though I think it's fair that you responded that way, is because it's like, yes, it was initial boom, but I really did have to work through a lot of stuff to really characterize myself as chronic pain free. Having said that, yes, I did have a huge amount of pain cessation. If you're at all a spiritual person, you could say I was obviously slated in some way, however you want to characterize the universe, to carry this message to, millions of people, which I have and continue to do. So maybe, I had a little bit of a huge oomph of that result. But it does happen. It does happen. But it's very important not to put a timeline on it. Because if we're just going to talk about basic science, if this reservoir being at maximum capacity is the reason the nervous system is hearing danger, danger, alarm, alarm, and sending the pain signals, then it is more just about understanding that journal speak and mindset management and all the things I teach in the book are like a ladle that's going to dump it out one day at a time. Some people have a lot of stuff, and that's okay. We've lived life. Like the third leg of the stool, so I believe do the work in patience and kindness are like the three basic pillars of my work. The third leg of the stool is self-compassion. We need to go easy on ourselves. We are a modern society of like abusers of self. We just talk to ourselves really harshly. We hold ourselves to impossible standards. We would never speak to people we love the way we speak to ourselves. And so I do teach people, and I do have a retreat coming up for anybody who can make it. It's the last week in June 22nd through the 27th at the Omega Institute in New York, where I'm on faculty. The reason I'm mentioning that is we really do a lot. Like that's like a crash course in really, really resetting your nervous system that week at Omega, because it's a 5-day retreat where we're together and it's amazing. But the reason I'm mentioning that is we have been through a lot. And sometimes it's like you really need extra support around doing this work so you can get that reservoir down. But once you do, the pain signals stop firing. So, although I'm not able to put a timeline on it, I will tell you it is a progressive process. You will see shift after shift. Your body becomes your proof. So, like, I have people who write to me and say, I had 20 migraines a month. I've been doing your work for a few months now, and I'm down to 4 migraines a month. Like, that's huge. That's huge. So, you just have to, like, sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's slower, sometimes it's more complicated, but you just have to acknowledge your wins and know that if anything is easy or too easy to be true, it's probably got some sort of falseness to it. Like, we have to do work in our lives to change. I think we've been sold a bill of goods. Nobody's necessarily at fault or deceiving us, but we have been sold a bill of goods as like a take a pill society. That there's like a pill that's going to make you all better, or like do this, quick and easy thing and it's going to make you all better. And even, Allan, as you mentioned, my 28-day challenge, I'll explain it. Even that, I had hesitation about putting in the book because I never want people to think this is like, oh, in a month I'm done with this. But the reason the 28-day challenge is really helpful is because what you do is you take a bit of an inventory of how you're feeling, where's your anxiety, where's your pain. You take an inventory, and then you put that inventory in a drawer and you do the practice for 28 days. The way I teach it, which also involves a little meditation at the end, nothing daunting. And then you go back to your little inventory at the end of 28 days. And what's really remarkable is you will then see this proof starting to happen in your own body. And that leads to this cascade of hope and relief that leads to the nervous system calming down even more.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that's worth mentioning is that trauma isn't just a back then thing. You're probably going through some things today and every day that more is going into the reservoir all the time.
Yes.
So we have to make this a consistent practice, and a 28-day challenge is a good way to kind of start a habit. So you're
Yes.
doing this consistently. You're keeping your reservoir low, which is going to keep you in a good state and probably out of pain.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Nicole, I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, and happiest you can be. What are three strategies or tactics to get and stay well?
I think the first real strategy for wellness is openness and willingness. Just we get so stuck in what we have been told, or maybe what we were brought up with, or what, has kept us safe. I know some people say, "Oh, no, no, no. I know what's good for me. I know what kind of person I am." And that's like a really fear-driven narrative because it limits us in being able to try something new. So I think the first pillar of wellness is an open mind. Is saying, might I might I replace my fear, my skepticism, my certainty with curiosity and just see what's next. So that's definitely the first. The second thing is knowing uncomfortable does not equal unsafe. You're going to need to go out of your comfort zone, even if it's something as basic and as acceptable for years as an exercise routine. You could go to the gym and hire a trainer, and the trainer could spend a couple hours with you teaching you all the machines and teaching you how to properly do them, and they could say, "What are your goals?" And you could say, "Oh, my goals are six-pack abs." And they'd say, "Great." They look at your body, they discuss maybe your nutrition, and then they say, "If you want six-pack abs, this is the way you need to eat. These are the machines you need to use. This is the consistency," right? And you could say, "Fantastic," and then never go back to the gym. And as much as you could say that was a fantastic trainer and I really liked them, nothing is going to change in your body. And if you don't have the willingness to change and be uncomfortable, you can't blame that trainer, nor can you blame the theory. And I'm not saying you should sit around blaming yourself either, but at least you can understand the second pillar of wellness has to be action, and you have to be willing to be uncomfortable because any human change requires discomfort. And then I think the third pillar of wellness is self compassion. I spent my entire life thinking self compassion was super dumb. You might be able to tell this from talking to me. I am a go, go, go kind of person. I'm super passionate. I know what I want and I go for it. Self compassion, like what the heck? There's no room for that. And what I have learned is if you do any wellness activity in your life without some level of conscious self compassion, it is like bailing out a boat with a hole in the bottom. You are just constantly adding more stuff in that reservoir of like, what's wrong with you? Girl, you've screwed it up again today. You didn't do your practice. You have to just come back to, I'm really here for this. I'm doing my best, or I'm not doing my best. Can I have compassion for the fact that somehow I can't find my way to my best today? Like, whatever it is, if you can just be in that space, you have a chance to change your life.
Great. Nicole, if someone wanted to learn more about you, more about your book, Mind Your Body, where would you like for me to send them?
Well, the first thing that I want people to do is go to my website, NicoleSachs.com, NicoleSachs.com. It has everything. When we were preparing for the book launch, we built this thing out like a hub. I have memberships. So, like, they're virtual. People come from all over the world. I literally have people from every stretch of the world, and we work together. I have a membership called Healing with Nicole, where I meet with these people twice a month. We have an everyday chat that's a private group. That is amazing. If you want to be with others doing the work, I have that. If you're a self-directed kind of person, I have a healing yourself tab, all sorts of courses, recorded retreats. Like, you can do this on your own. The book is available everywhere you get books. And so, what's your favorite? Your independent bookstore. You can order it, Amazon, whatever. And I just want, oh, and the podcast. So, like, part of Believe, part of the first pillar is like immersing yourself in the material. You sometimes need to hear from other people that remind you of yourself, and we're all so much more similar than we are different. Of like, they lived through this, this is how they did it. So go to anywhere you get your podcasts, go to the Cure for Chronic Pain and listen to it. Avail yourself of this information, but everything that you need from me can be found at NicoleSachs.com, and I welcome you. This is such a place of inclusion. If you can make it to a live retreat, if you can make it to New York, I have one woman who just wrote on my community. She's flying from Australia. We get people from all over the world come to this thing. It's wonderful, and we just embrace you for that whole week with information and science and love and community. So, like, there's so many ways to help yourself.
Awesome. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you, Allan, for having me. It was a great conversation.